Thank you for being here. This is going to be the last panel of the full conference. I'm Tomas Vagoun. I'm the Cybersecurity and Privacy R&D Technical Coordinator at the National Coordination Office for NITRD. And it's my pleasure to introduce this panel. We put this panel together because we wanted to share with you and give you a sense of the priorities that shape research that's funded by the federal government. So you will hear about two strategic plans, Cybersecurity Strategic Plan and upcoming Privacy R&D Strategic Plan, and also some thoughts from the panelists on how those plans will shape the future federal strategies for R&D in cybersecurity and privacy. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce the panel. Starting on my right is Greg Shannon, Assistant Director for Cybersecurity Strategy at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. Next to him is Jim Kurose, Assistant Director of NSF for the CISE Directorate. Next to him is Doug Maughan, Director of the Cybersecurity Division at DHS S&T. And last but not least, Bill Newhouse, Deputy Director of the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, or NICE, at NIST. So what we'll do is you'll hear briefly about the Cybersecurity R&D Strategic Plan that was just released in February of this year. You also hear a little bit about the upcoming Federal Privacy R&D Strategic Plan, some discussions by the panelists about what does all of that mean to the agencies and to you, hopefully. And then I hope we'll have enough time for questions. So all the things you wanted to ask, please be prepared to do so. So with that, let me switch over to Greg, and we'll start with the next presentation.
Thank you, Tomas. So this plan was released in February 2016, and we have some copies here. My colleague in the back, she will, if you raise your hand and look forward, Michelle, she'll hand you a hard copy. We've got about 100 left. So again, if you're interested in a hard copy, please raise your hand. So this is a plan that came out as part of the Cybersecurity National Action Plan that was released in February. And it was requested in December 2014 by Congress as part of the Cybersecurity Enhancement Act. It was an opportunity to have a conversation with Congress in terms of what they wanted to know what the federal government was doing from an R&D point of view to improve cybersecurity. They set out very specific requirements in terms of, they wanted to see goals, they wanted to see objectives, they wanted to know what risks were being addressed, they wanted to understand how this affected emerging technologies and such. So it gave us a very nice roadmap to build the plan. It built on the 2011 plan that we've talked about here on the NITRD panel over the last 5 years. This plan was done as part of the National Security Technology Council, as in coordination with NITRD to write this plan. So pretty much everyone up here helped write this plan, and others that you know within the federal government who are program managers and such. It also involved the President's Council of Advisors for Science and Technology, PCAST. There was an NSF RFI requesting comments or input for the plan. And then DHS S&T did community gatherings, I think, what, 8 of them? 12. 12, okay, thank you. 12 of them over the course of the summer and fall. And then, as I said, it was released as part of the broader plan. And in the panel, I'll talk a little bit about what that means in that broader context. But I want to present the basic components of the plan just so we have some context. So the writing group decided that the fundamental challenge in cybersecurity is to make it less onerous for the users and developers and implementers, and yet provide more effective defenses. One of the themes that we emphasized throughout the plan was this notion of evidence of efficacy and efficiency. And I'll have to admit I'm quite delighted that the papers that have been presented the last 3 days, that there's a lot of evidence, there's a lot of notion of how effective they are, and with the various performance charts, a good sense of efficiency in terms of how much effort it takes to, what the cost is of some of the implementations. There were 3 goals that we laid out. This was something that Congress asked for. What's the goal of the R&D that we're doing? And this isn't so much to change any of the research that you all are doing. It's mainly to tell a consistent story with Congress, with policymakers, in a way that they can understand and appreciate the value of the work that we're trying to deliver to the American public. So the short-term goal is to help improve the efficacy and efficiency of risk management. This ties in with the NIST risk management framework. That's the near term. The midterm is to achieve sustainably secure systems development and operation. And again, some of the work that I've seen here the last 3 days in terms of sustainable, secure tool chains, secure infrastructure really play into that. And long term, the notion of effective and efficient defensive deterrence. The notion that you're building capabilities, building infrastructure that an adversary is going to have an exceptionally difficult, if not an impossible time compromising. From a technical point of view, we want to tell an understandable story, again, for policymakers to understand how all these technologies fit together and thwart malicious cyber activities. Of course, there's a lot of simplification that's gone into this diagram, but it gives us a basic story, and most technologies can fit into 1 or 2 of these categories in terms of how they help thwart malicious cyber activities. Based on those elements, we identified 21 R&D objectives for those defensive elements. And they highlight promising research areas. So that's why I encourage you to look at the plan. And also on the table back there, I've got a handout, a 1-page handout that has the 21 R&D objectives listed. So if you're looking for, wondering where your thesis topic might fit in there, that'd be a good place to look. But also, these are meant to provide an overall measurement of R&D progress. So it's like, for these objectives, when we go back and talk to Congress each year about the federal budget, as part of the NITRD R&D budget supplement each year, being able to characterize, point to successes. And so part of the job here in seeing these presentations in the last 3 days is to map those into how they represent progress in the field. These objectives are not meant to be comprehensive. So they're meant to be notional in the sense of measuring progress. So they might be plenty of other objectives that one could have for R&D in this area that line up with those 3 goals. Just 2 examples of objectives. In deter, the notion of being able to have quantifiable metrics of adversary level of effort is a key challenge. And we'd love to be able to report back to Congress over the coming years that we're making progress in that. Another example is protect, a midterm one, to create tools that reduce vulnerabilities by a factor of 10. We're actually working on a project right now to reduce them by a factor of 100 in collaboration with NIST. So you get a sense of kind of how we instantiate the goals down into specific objectives. What does success look like? We want to make it so that as new technologies come out, we have the capability, the science and technology, infrastructure, platforms to make them secure. And this can be done efficiently and effectively. The burden on users should be minimal. We've seen time and time again that asking to do users even simple things to improve their security posture, their privacy posture, is actually really asking them a lot, and they're not going to be 100% on it. And really, in the long term, we want to be able to deter adversaries from even having the capability to attack the systems, to make them sufficiently assured, protected, that they really don't have the resources to compromise that. One thing I do want to mention is also this Commission on Enhancing National Cybersecurity that was announced in February as part of the Cybersecurity National Action Plan. This is 12 commission members. Their report is due in around the 1st of February. Peter Lee from Microsoft Research is on it, Herb Lin from Stanford, Annie Anton from Georgia Tech, Gallagher, I can't remember Gallagher's first name, from Pat Gallagher, ex-NIST director, is on the panel. So it's a distinguished panel of a dozen individuals. The others tend to be more political and business oriented. But one of the things that they're investigating, or that they're been asked by the president to study, is to develop recommendations about what additional investments are needed in R&D to enhance cybersecurity. And so the plan gives them kind of a starting point to have that conversation And as some of you may be approached to have that conversation with them, I encourage you to use the plan as a common language to have that conversation. So with that, there's a whole bunch of information available online that complements the 2011 plan. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tomas.
Okay, so I hope you were paying attention because you just learned new acronym, EEE or E cubed. What is that?
Evidence.
Evidence, efficacy, efficiency. Efficiency. So remember that, right? That's really one of the key science underpinnings of the plan. So you will, I'm sure, hear about that over and over from agencies. Again, you heard it here first, E cubed, okay? With that, I want to take a few minutes to give you a summary, an introduction to another strategic plan that has been or is being developed within the federal government. And it deals with priorities for privacy research. But before I start, let me preface that by saying that the plan has not been released yet. It's in the final stages of being reviewed, so anything I say is subject to change. But at the same time, I think that it's far enough in the process that this was a good opportunity here today to give you a sense of what that strategy is about, because going forward, as we try to build a privacy research portfolio, community, and impact, this will affect and guide some of the priorities that you will see. So a quick background, privacy concerns are not new, of course. They have been around, ever since humankind. But most recently, in terms of technology, many recommendations have been made from PCAST, from the White House, and elsewhere about the need and the fact that federal agencies, and especially those that fund research, should put together a multi-agency research and development strategy to advance the science, engineering, policy, and social understanding of privacy protections. Dealing with privacy challenges or our inability right now is seen as one of the key impediments to really getting much more benefit out of information technologies. So as context for that, about a year and a half ago, a working group was formed within NITRD to look at what are the needs in terms of the federal government, in terms of society, in terms of individuals in privacy, and what is the role of privacy research, especially federally funded privacy research, in solving or addressing these challenges. So I had the pleasure and the challenge to coordinate and lead this group, and so I'm happy to give you an introduction into what the thinking is at this point. So, of course, you can approach privacy from many different perspectives. Privacy is very faceted. You can think of privacy and bring out different concepts depending on whether you're talking about, confidentiality, solitude, control of one's personal space, autonomy. So there are different conceptions of privacy, and they're all valid. But for the purposes of the socio-technical privacy research, which is the concern space of NITRD, we characterize privacy as basically subjects, data about those subjects, the actions that are taken with that data, all in some context. So that is our characterization of privacy. And then we set out to put together a strategy that takes into consideration how to understand the nature of privacy, how to understand privacy, different privacy perspectives. There are perspectives by individuals, by commerce, by government, by society. They all have something meaningful to say about what privacy is and what privacy should be. And then set out to create strategy for knowledge and tools to identify and mitigate emerging risks to privacy, and how to deal with the collection, the use of data about individuals, what to do with that properly. So what is different today? Why this privacy focus? And this was, I think, well said in the PCAST Big Data and Privacy Report. You know, there are a lot of new privacy concerns, and a lot of privacy concerns are being amplified because of the large-scale data collections and analysis and algorithmic decisions that we're seeing more and more, you know, around us. And so a lot of the privacy concerns deal now with the fact that we can infer private facts from fusion of non-sensitive data, that re-identification leads to loss of anonymity, you know, individuals experience foreclosure of autonomy, meaning being able to make decisions on their own, from biased or false conclusions and decisions by big data analytics, location privacy violations, and in the world of IoT, really no good way of granting or declining consent for data collections anymore. Also, you know, as the White House Big Data Report you know, alluded to and characterized, big data is not neutral, right? Big data analytics can and do endanger long-standing civil rights, and this community is part of, well, what do we do about that? So as we were putting the strategy together, these three main areas became our basis or foundation for the strategy as the challenges that we saw. One, privacy is contextual, right? The answer is, well, it depends usually. And so that's a hard thing to do, to build IT systems when the answer is, well, it depends, right? Because privacy expectations vary by individuals, groups, time, cultures, and so on, and depend so largely on circumstances. There's lack of transparency in data collection, use, and retention. We have little or limited understanding and control of what data is collected, how it's used, and what benefits are gained from that use. And that's an issue. And then in the area of data aggregation, analysis, and release, as we know, there's a growing use of predictive algorithms that evaluate and score individuals. There's lack of understanding how individuals are affected. There are concerns from the mosaic effect and re-identification of individuals. So that became the kind of the key basis for the strategy. And so just to give you a view what those prospective privacy research priorities are, one, right, privacy is multidisciplinary, it's a multifaceted concept. So we need to both approach it from a research perspective that way, and also the solutions need to be multidisciplinary. It's not just technology, but it needs to involve ethics, social scientists, economics, policy, law, and so on. If we want to build systems that protect or preserve or enhance privacy, well, we need to understand what that means, right? We have limited understanding about what do people really mean when they say they want privacy, right? What are those values that are important to people, and how those values or objectives could be affected by IT systems. We need to be able to develop systems, and we have to have design methods that can bridge that gap between privacy aspirations and the requirements, the implementations, right? There's a big gap right now there. We need to increase transparency of data collection, use, and retention. It's one thing to know that what the privacy rules might be or are, but we also need to be able to be confident that those rules are being followed by the systems. And so we need to have ways to assure that privacy rules can govern and govern information flows and use. And that can come in many different ways, maybe tagging of and binding the rules, the privacy rules to data is perhaps a way forward, but there are other techniques. We need to develop new and better approaches for remediation and recovery. They are more lightweight, more appropriate for the digital age. And we need to be able to analyze the, here's the word again, efficacy of existing redress mechanisms, whether they're legal, economic, or policy-based, to understand what works and why. And lastly, again, we need to work on reducing privacy risks of analytical algorithms. I think that's one of the big growing areas of concern and interest for research is dealing with that question. So that's a brief summary of the upcoming privacy research strategy, hopefully soon. And what I'd like to do next is, my contact information, is to switch a little bit to now having the panelists and the agency representatives, give you their perspective on what these two new strategic plans mean to them and to the agencies they represent, and what are some of the things taking place in that context. So, Jim, why don't we start with you, please?
Okay.
You can.
Want me to sit here?
Sure.
Is that fine? Okay, great. So my name's Jim Kurose. I'm the Assistant Director at the National Science Foundation for the CISE Directorate. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to give you just sort of a brief overview of some of the CISE programs and actually NSF-wide programs in cybersecurity and in privacy. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the future and sort of where I think things are headed. So let me start off by saying that across the entire National Science Foundation, there's an investment, a yearly investment of about $160 million in various aspects of cybersecurity. Probably, and I know Deborah Shands, who's one of our program directors, was here last night, and she was talking about some of our programs. Really, the flagship program that I imagine a number of you here are funded under is the Secure and Trustworthy Cyberspace, or the SATC program. So the SATC program's funded at a little over $70 million a year. Last year, in last year, there were 200 new awards announced, and there's usually about 800 or so, order 800 active awards in the SATC program at any one time. And so, if you've had NSF grants or you're familiar with NSF, you understand that the mission of NSF is really to fund fundamental research. And so when you saw what Greg was talking about and Tomas was talking about, we're really talking about the longer-term research horizons and some of the fundamental challenges there. So that's just sort of a numbers overview of some of the things going on inside NSF. Before I joined NSF a year and a half ago, I'd been a faculty member for 32 years, and as a faculty member, I never really cared where my funding agencies had been. I wanted to know where they were going. So let me say a couple of words about that. So again, first of all, cybersecurity research, broadly writ, is incredibly important. It's one of the few areas where our funding doesn't ever go down, or the levels of our investments doesn't go down over the years, and it's just an incredibly important area for the country. So let me say that for starters. Thinking about some of the newer directions that the programs may be headed in, again, in this context of always thinking about fundamental research, is we've made investments in the past in test beds for cybersecurity research to be able to take theoretical research and systems research and try it out in practice. We actually, with several folks here around the table, worked on a report to Congress that went in just a few months ago, sort of evaluating and talking about the test beds that we've done in the past and looking towards the future. So at NSF, we're teaming with some of our fellow agencies here and thinking about what future versions of those test beds might look like. I wanted to say a couple words about education. Education is very important. A number of you may know about the Cyber Core programs that we have, so those do scholarships, but they also do capacity building. And something that we're undertaking at NSF is a real focus. We've done a lot in K through 12 education, a lot of successes like Computer Science for All that was announced by the president. Really starting to take a look at the undergraduate education and trying to move the needle there in a number of different directions. So I think you can look forward to activities there from NSF over the next couple of years. And maybe the last thing I wanted to talk about was the director of NSF about 2 weeks ago. There's a National Science Board that sort of oversees the National Science Foundation, and our director, really for the first time that NSF has done this in quite a long time, got up and said, look, here are 6 big ideas to be thinking about for the future across the foundation, or 6 research ideas, and then there were some procedural ideas. And I wanted to tell you what they are because you will see computer science, first of all, in every one of those, and you will see security and privacy also very broadly writ. So when you get a chance, if you were to search for big ideas in National Science Foundation. You probably turn up a science article that would give you a good overview of those ideas. But let me just tell you about what a couple of them are. So the first one is called Harnessing the Data Revolution. And so this is an all of NSF, or would be an all of NSF activity to really start to move the needle on data systems. And if you think about what Tomas was just talking about data being contextual, about transparency in collection, and about the issues of aggregations and analytics, you'll see all of that in that particular, and that was the very first sort of big idea that the director talked about. The second idea that the director talked about is called Shaping the Human Technology Frontier. And I will tell you that every program cannot have more than 5 things, right? Because it's got to be, what are you focusing on? And security and privacy, you will see, is called out as one of those 5 things that's being focused on there. And in particular, the socio-technical, the interface between technology and the human, that goes this way from us to the cyber, and then from the cyber shaping individuals and shaping how society interacts. So I think both of those big ideas, which are really the first 2 that the director has talked about, security and privacy, cybersecurity and computing, are broadly writ across all of those. A third area is quantum, and obviously for segments of this community, quantum's of great interest. That's the third big idea. There's an idea of rules of life, the Arctic, and I should remember what multi-messenger astrophysics. Okay, maybe that one doesn't have cybersecurity in it. But those are the 6 big ideas, and at the NSF we're still now, so now we've rolled these things out and beginning to execute on these. And as we think to a transition in government and where things might be going over the next 3 or 4 years, I think you'll see these ideas playing out largely. So maybe with that, I'll stop. I'll turn things over to Doug, and thank you all for the opportunity to have a chance to speak here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Great, thanks. Doug Maughan, I'm the Division Director for Cybersecurity at DHS Science and Technology. Just to give a little bit of a different flavor on things, so as Jim mentioned, NSF is very much a basic research organization. DHS is not. We take the outputs of NSF and fund the applied research and development and test and evaluation and transition and commercialization. So we're very much a product-driven activity to try to drive technology and products into operational environments. DHS, many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with at least a couple of missions of DHS. Every time you're at an airport, you see TSA, that's a DHS organization. Or if you go in or out of the country and you come in at CBP, that's another DHS organization, but I'm going to guess you may not know a lot of the rest of DHS, and that's what we're finding out. But we have major missions in the areas of counterterrorism, borders and immigration, and customs, as well as resilience. So FEMA, anytime there's a flood or a hurricane or something like that, is a FEMA exercise. And then, of course, cybersecurity is one of our 5 major missions. Within the cybersecurity mission space, we have 4 specific areas. One is we are responsible for the cybersecurity of the critical infrastructure, working with the private sector, especially in those critical sectors like electric and banking and finance and water, et cetera. So we have a key mission area there. Second mission is our job is to secure .gov. So that's not the military, but that's the civilian government organization. So our job is actually to secure NIST and NSF and a few others. Third is the law enforcement supporting mission. So DHS is the largest law enforcement supporting organization in the government between Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, U.S. Secret Service, Coast Guard, and CBP. And then our fourth area is what we call strengthening the ecosystem, and so this includes where S&T fits, research and development, developing new products, awareness and education, as well as our international partnerships. We have a dozen of those international partnerships in full swing. So that's where the DHS mission space is. Within science and technology, where we're focusing is on developing new products and new technologies. Our budget is roughly $90 million a year, And it's about 40% academic, 50% to industry, both small and large, and about 10% to some of the national labs and other government agencies. And in the end, our goal is to develop new capabilities and bring those into the marketplace or into operations, and ensure that we transition those technologies. We don't want them left in the hands of the government, and sometimes we may not want them left in the hands of the researcher if the researcher's not interested in doing the business piece. Our third area is, in fact, providing an R&D leadership globally. So we work with all of our international partners as well as interagency. And our fourth mission is to help develop the next generation of cyber leaders. And so we do have some active engagements there, and looking at how do we replace many of us who will all be retired in a short period of time. So, as it applies to the federal plan that Greg and Tomas have just talked about, from a DHS perspective, we've already funded some amount of research in privacy, and we certainly believe in the strategy and that it's going to become an even more important area. DHS is extremely focused on privacy. We have your data and everybody else's data, and the concern is how do we make sure that we protect that data and it's not misused or abused. So privacy, every component of DHS has its own privacy officer, as well as an overarching privacy officer for the department. So certainly we're fully in support of the privacy strategy, and we'll certainly expect to see more R&D in that space. As it applies to the federal R&D strategic plan, I think there are certainly a couple of areas that I can see from a DHS perspective that we're interested in. Certainly the human aspects of cybersecurity. We've long forgotten about how important the human is, and so we're now paying the price, I think, for that. And another area that Greg talked a little bit is about, the whole E3 and efficiency and effectiveness. That means we have to be able to measure. And I'm sure many of us in the room realize that we don't do a very good job of measuring security or being able to even quantify how secure something is or isn't. So certainly from our standpoint, I think that's another key area for us. Again, I think I'll close out is, if you look at DHS and what we're focusing on, just keep in mind that we're a shorter term organization. Most of our things are 3 years or less, and by 3 years or less, we're actually looking for that research to be mature enough to productize. Just to give you an example of some of the things we're also doing, we're here in Silicon Valley. DHS has just established an office here in Silicon Valley, and we're actually funding startup companies to bring new technologies to the department and to the federal government. Again, looking at how do we do that in less than 2 years, and it's not just in the cybersecurity area, but across all of our mission spaces. So I'll stop there, and thanks again. Look forward to the conversation, and turn it to Bill.
Cool, thanks. I'm Bill Newhouse from NIST. How many people have read a NIST special publication ever in their time in this field? Cool. How many people have participated at a NIST workshop or a conference? Outstanding. How many people are on a NIST public working group right now, or have been part of a drafting of a paper at NIST? Okay, good. So I don't need to really tell you too much about NIST, but often I want to, because there's students here too, right? And I want you to know about NIST because I think we're valuable. The director of NIST will say to you that we're the nation's laboratory. We have 7 labs, and 2 of them are focused on metrology, which is measurement, so material measurement and physical measurement labs. We have 2 that are focused on technologies, information technology and engineering, and I'm from the information technology lab. And then we have a communication technology lab, which is going to be 2 things. It's going to be a technology lab, but it's also going to be hopefully a user facilities lab for first responder kind of networking questions and things like that. But the 2 other national user facilities, we have a Center for Nanoscale Science and Technology where a lot of physicists do amazing things, and we have a neutron research center where we get to fire neutrons at stuff and measure and look at the physical structure of things. And turns out stuff like that can actually affect the information technology space because we learn how to do things, higher density hard disks and things and cool stuff like that. So NIST has been around for over 100 years, since 1988 in our current name structure. About 3,000 federal employees, a couple thousand guest researchers from all over the world. It's a pretty cool place for that. In the area of cybersecurity, Our description for that, for our portfolio says we do research development and apply practical, innovative security technologies and methodologies that enhance our ability to address current and future computer and information security challenges. So there's some basic research in there, and there's some very, very middle road kind of let's define things stuff in there, and then there's very practical, this is how you turn that thing on to raise the noise floor so that security is being applied more often and more regularly. And there's tons of areas that from the papers I heard today that I'd immediately like to connect you with people at NIST who are doing the work. We do a lot of the work intramurally, meaning we have a staff that's spending our, let's say, $80 million in cybersecurity, $140 million in IT overall. And the way we engage is through those workshops and through the publications where all the publications go out for public comment, and there's periods of opportunities for everybody to come back into a document and say this is wrong or this is right or thank you for writing that in a really good way. And so it socializes the concepts very carefully as we go through them. This past year we have 7 divisions in the Information Technology Lab, and a new one's called the Applied Cybersecurity Division. And I'll just quickly point out that I'm the Deputy Director of NICE, which is kind of a cool way to be. I'm a nice guy. But we also have NSTIC, and we have the NCCOE, and those are all great acronyms. And NSTIC is the National Strategy for Trusted Identities in Cyberspace. It is aimed at driving away the use of passwords, okay? And it's driving towards more multi-factor things for authentication. That's oversimplifying their mission, but that's a national strategy. The NCCOE is the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence. I also work there as a security engineer, and our goal there is to demonstrate that standards can be applied in today's technologies to improve, again, that noise floor I just mentioned. So that's the Applied Cybersecurity Division. Much of the publications that you raised your hands at having read in the past came out of our Computer Security Division, which has been around for 30 years focusing on this area. And the deeper research in cryptography, we do most recently the SHA-3 competition is something that you might have heard about, how they managed through that. They're thinking about post-quantum cryptography, things that'll be able to survive long enough to protect the data we need to protect. What else to share? I'd rather let you guys ask us questions. To the question of what will NIST be doing for either of these new strategic plans, we do have a privacy engineering effort. Naomi Lefkowitz is leading it, and Sean Brooks will be at tomorrow's privacy workshop. And in that one, we're working on guidance that can be used to decrease privacy risks and to enable organizations to make purposeful decisions about the resource allocations and the effective implementations of controls that'll help with privacy in our information system. So that's a effort that's been going on about a year and a half, and you'll hear more. Well, if you're lucky enough to stick around tomorrow, you'll get to know more about that. But that aligns nicely, and the leaders of that effort have been working with Tomas deeply on the paper that's going to be published soon. On the other document, I was pleased that every time I walked away from one of our drafting sessions with Greg and Doug and others and Tomas, and Jim and his team was there as well, that I could go back to NIST and say, they want to put something in there about risk management. Is that cool? Well, absolutely to NIST, that's very cool, because risk management framework is something we've been focused on for a long time. And about a year and a half ago, the DoD said, from now on, our risk management framework will adopt the ones that NIST has already drafted, because we're already working together to do those documents. And then the executive order on critical infrastructure protection has a framework that is all about risk management and identifying risk. And so I was really pleased that that's going to be a focus area, and I think that'll be an interesting thing, because when I heard side channel attacks earlier today, how do you take a side channel attack that you've demonstrated works and turn that into some risk metric or score that a CEO or somebody who's running an enterprise can make a more informed decision? And I think that's where we need to drive research in the future. So I think I'll stop there and then let you guys ask us tons of questions. I do believe we're all going to be here for the social hour afterwards too, so you don't have to get all your questions on the mic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. So I want to invite you to ask questions. We want to give a lot of time for that. And as you think about them, and I see 3 mics that you can come up to, I'd like to pick up on the point that Bill just raised. One of the S&T goals, right, of the Cybersecurity Strategic Plan is to counter adversaries' asymmetrical advantages with effective and efficient risk management. Okay. So that is, one of the S&T goals. And so the question is, first, let's unpack that a little bit, but also, what does that mean for the academic research community? Clearly the strategic plan is asking for contributions that can be put in a risk management context or can work with that approach. So you're invited to ask questions, but let's first hear any response from Doug or Bill or anybody else.
Sure, I'll
What
I'll take a first shot. I'm going to ask a Bill question. So how many of you have ever read or looked at the NIST cybersecurity framework? Okay, more than I would have thought, actually. So one of the things we discussed as we were writing this federal R&D strategic plan, and even in meetings since then, is the fact that when researchers talk about the research they're doing, they do not talk about it in terms of a canonical set of phrases. So if you look at the federal R&D strategic plan, it talks about deter, protect, detect, and adapt. If you look at the cybersecurity framework that was published by NIST, it's identify, protect, protect, respond, recover, right? Very similar things. If you look at the federal R&D strategic plan and the NIST framework, I think the one thing that's a little bit different is, in the sense of the NIST framework, there are organizations that have added to that framework. So it tends to be considered a one-dimensional framework, but if you look at some of the things the finance sector has been doing, they've now started to apply those 5 categorizations to things like devices, applications, networks, data, people. So now what you have is a 5x5 matrix. You now have a 2-dimensional look at things. But in the end, as you start thinking about more and more of the R&D plan and the cybersecurity framework, as researchers, you need to start doing a better job of characterizing, I think, the research you're doing against those documents, and in general about the phrase risk management, and how can your technologies help us as end consumers, as government leaders and decision makers. How can we better decide the value, the efficiency, and the effectiveness of those solutions? Yeah, jump in.
So maybe if I could respond to something Doug just said, and I might characterize it slightly differently. So I don't think that necessarily as researchers you want to contextualize your research in those specific areas. But the value of these strategic plans are, as researchers, we're always looking for how do we choose important problems, right? And problems that matter. And these documents are filled with a lot of really smart people's views of things that matter. So when we pick problems, and you're writing an NSF proposal, and why is this an important problem? Well, you've got some ammunition there. And so I look at these documents, well, me personally, I look at these documents as roadmaps where people have set out, here are things that are important, that we think collectively are important. You as a researcher may or may not think that, but if you're looking for some kind of collective wisdom about a set of important problems, you can absolutely find them here.
I'll add the human aspects is one of our 6 critical areas, and Doug should have said please, right? Because then you'd all be like, oh, he said please do this for us. What are the things that influence that I saw in some of the papers today that there's a cultural context to how the device is used in a certain place, so there's international norms to this. NIST is very interested in really expanding in the usability space, but it's hard to find enough people with enough time, and then researchers who make the time, who are computer scientists, to have the conversation across those 2 communities in a way that's meaningful and believable, and so that's another area that I think NIST would like to see grow.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing in terms of contextualizing your research. We were mindful when we wrote the cybersecurity R&D plan that you're going to talk to your representatives, your congressional staff, your policymakers. This plan gives you a language to talk to them about. In other words, you can hold up that diagram and say, our research fits here, and this is how it's benefiting. And your agency partners, your program managers will love you for that. because that's an important connection of showing, policymakers that, who really ultimately, decide where to make investments in this area, or, the amount of investment to make, which is today about $750 million. So, the country's making a huge investment, to show that it's actually paying off.
Okay, questions from any or all of you? Don't be shy. This is where your next solicitations come from. Yes.
Wow. A little short here, but hi. Lee Beausoleil, Department of Defense, and if this is a bad question, blame Bill because he planted the seed in my head. So, as someone whose my mission is security for high-performance computing, kudos to you guys for giving it a call out in the strategic plan. However, I think there's a lot of catch-up that both the HPC community and the cybersecurity community needs to do to really understand the problem space. And by that I mean, what solutions can we apply today? And being someone that's working the problem, I think it's very few. And where are the gaps that need to be addressed? So here's the question. What is the plan for building a budget, especially an R&D budget, that can start both communities understanding the problem set and really kind of addressing research needs in that area, especially moving forward with NSCI?
I can take that if you want. Okay. Yeah, so, you mentioned the NSC, the National Computing Strategic Initiative, also known as, traditionally high-performance computing or exascale computing. That's a plan that I believe just was released in December? No, August.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was just released last year.
Last July, right.
Last July, the National Strategic Computing Initiative. And, they've recognized that that's a priority, and there's a workshop plan this fall to try and get that community going so they can identify what the challenges are and then potentially have budget applied against it. The funny story is that they put out a call for a workshop, and the call for the workshop made it sound like you needed to be an expert in both areas, and I think they got 2 responses. So there's clearly a need to develop a community there. So, if you have an interest in exascale computing and kind of what the security challenges there might be, there's greenfield there, and I think it's going to be an emerging area over the next couple of years, the next decade.
Thanks.
So each of the strategic plans that you listed have a number of recommendations associated with them, and several of you have already talked about metrics. How are you going to measure progress towards accomplishing those recommendations?
For the in the cybersecurity one, we actually didn't put measurements. We actually treated those almost like recommendations to Congress. So I guess coming to a bill near you maybe is one way to measure progress. We really focus on the progress of the science and technology base. Is the science and technology base advancing in ways that the objectives, the R&D objectives that we put in there measured? But Doug, how do you measure your
well, I think
your
that's a
progress?
great question, Rob. Is how do you measure progress in research and development? I have a little bit different model for how I measure. Because my agency and the stuff we do is a little bit different, I measure my progress and my success by the number of things we see into the commercial marketplace and being used. Maybe not the best measurement of R&D, but certainly maybe of D. But I still maintain that the measurement piece is hard. And even though we talk about metrics, most of the time we're talking about metrics of security of systems. The metrics of research ROI is a really tough discussion and one that I don't believe we, even in the interagency, have a really good cross-agency answer for. I mean, each of us measured a little bit differently, but it's certainly something we probably ought to spend more time thinking about. How do I evaluate your research project and whether or not to keep funding you or not fund you?
I will say also that the National Science Foundation, this is a problem that we've been wrestling with for quite some time, and have actually got together a group of 4 people actually in the director's office to be looking at exactly that issue. And again, I think for agencies where the research horizons are much longer term, measuring research progress against a strategic plan over a short period of time is probably a difficult thing to do. But again, it's even harder where sometimes the fruits of a research don't even show up for 10, 15, 20 years, and maybe in a very indirect way. So as Doug said, I think it's a tremendously challenging problem. We've had a lot of discussions about how to do that, and honestly, I haven't seen great, obvious, oh yeah, that's what we should be doing come out yet.
I do want to mention a proxy metric, actually. Being in the Office of Science and Technology Policy, actually, I'm in the National Security International Affairs, and so I get to see how how the President's Science Advisor, Dr. Holdren, interacts internationally with science ministers around the world. And so a proxy measurement is the eagerness with which our international partners are excited to work with the United States. So the notion of science diplomacy and kind of that payout, and I think the sort of multinational cohort that Doug has put together in DHS, what do you have, 11 countries now?
15.
15, okay, I'm always behind on the numbers.
14, sorry.
14, okay, so 14 countries are engaged with DHS, and that's just phenomenal. And, it's a diverse range of large countries, of small countries, I think pretty much from every continent too, so, short of Antarctica. So.
Okay, great. Let's go over to the side.
Okay. Is there going to be a harmonization of the risk management framework, the system security engineering document that's in draft, and the IT requirements for cybersecurity?
The first 2, yes. We get Ron onto campus every once in a while. He's the author of the system security document you're talking about, and he's certainly not doing that in a vacuum. And he's paying attention to the feedback and the evolution of the framework. I also need to work that into a workforce framework that we have for cybersecurity roles. The IT requirements one sounds to me like you're talking about the FISMA requirements, and that's a community that knows exactly what it needs to write down and say that people are ready to do the job. And you can find all these articles in the media that says they're getting Ds for doing that, and that's kind of unfortunate because they're very careful thinkers. When we move that workforce framework to having cybersecurity roles, we're including IT roles, specifically because IT roles are enablers of cybersecurity, and it's kind of the nice pathway in, and if you're doing IT, you have an impact on cybersecurity. So they're getting closer together. I can't say perfect promise yet, but every document that NIST will be putting out in the future will try to circle in those 3 spaces that you just described. So thanks.
I'll just quickly add, in terms of the privacy research, right, the cybersecurity framework at NIST, as it was developed, it was asked to also address privacy. That gave rise to the privacy engineering efforts to bring that understanding into the framework, which is now being reflected and is affected by the strategic plan. So there is that harmonization, as you said. All right, Sam, over to you.
Yep. So I'm continuing in the same line as the first person who asked the question. So Doug has talked about funding research that helps solve the security problems of the national critical infrastructure, et cetera. But how should a researcher at a usual university find out about what the needs are in critical infrastructure? So are there cybersecurity problems in subways or water plants? And if so, how do they learn enough to be able to do the fundamental research that's needed?
So I'll offer one opportunity that, like last year, we did a workshop in cybersecurity for smart cities. So we asked people who thought who are doing innovative thing for smart cities to talk about the cybersecurity aspect of it. And I'll admit also that people quickly went to the cool part of the smart thing and not the cybersecurity part of it in describing it. So that's not a great endorsement of coming to our workshops, but I think that's where you're going to find the community where you can meet somebody in your local critical infrastructures, that are around you. They come to NIST, join them. our critical infrastructure framework, there's continuous workshops. They just did one in April. There'll be another one this summer. Each of those provide opportunities to be with people who have to think about their critical infrastructure systems in ways that you may not have imagined, and which regulations they have to live with and what compliance things they're doing. And I think that's a good information spot for at least somebody at each university to be strongly aware of.
So I'd like to also mention that I think and you know this, it's not like you just show up at a workshop and then you walk away and say, okay, I get it all, right? It's a long-term process of really being able to understand deeply what those challenges are. I think that's really hard to do when a funding model is, it's a 3-year research grant. So I think that one of the things that's really neat is, in certain areas, a lot of thinking about what's the right timescale for funding and larger scale activities, so that you have the time to be able to, bake in true collaborations that way and really be able to interact. And it's not just, you get a sweet spot of 18 months in the middle of a 3-year grant, but that you've got a much longer sweet spot in the context of a 5-year grant, or, some of the centers that NSF has funded, I think really provide that kind of opportunity. They also provide an opportunity for community to gel around a particular area, not just the PIs, but the outreach from those kinds of centers.
So let's take the 2 more. I think, Seda, you were next. And then I think we'll be out of time, but I do want to remind people the panelists will be at the reception, will be around, so we can continue one-on-one discussions afterwards. But let's start over there.
Thank you so much. Seda Gurses from Princeton University. I'm also one of the co-organizers of the Privacy Engineering Workshop tomorrow. We've been doing some systematic analysis of the literature coming out of cybersecurity research, and we see a lot of propositions for very intrusive technologies and no reflection on ethical and privacy or civil liberties issues. So I'm wondering, are there mechanisms that you have thought of beyond the harmonization of the 2 frameworks, which actually would lead to the avoidance of the situation where the last slide says we have privacy issues, or some people do privacy research, but others do research that basically breaks all of the solutions that are coming out of the privacy space. So have you thought about how to break the siloed knowledge and kind of conflicting interaction?
So I'll take a first shot at it. I'm hoping you're familiar with some of the stuff we did 5 years ago in the Menlo report. I have a new program manager there, and I've challenged her to take the Menlo principles and the ethics as it applies there, and we need to go to the next level of whatever that looks like from a community. And while there wasn't a large focus in the privacy specifically as part of Menlo and the companion report that we did 5 years ago, I certainly believe that's kind of in the future as part of this next round of what we're going to do with Menlo and the ethics and the ethical principles, as not only as it applies to the research community, but as it applies to the consumers of the technology. And I think for right now, that's the one thing that we've done from a DHS perspective that I think has implications not only for R&D, but for end consumers.
I've had some conversations with Helen Nissenbaum at NYU about exactly that topic, and one of the things I've taken away, again, comes back to this issue of timescale, because I think if it's a short period of time, it's almost just drive-by, and it gets to be, the last bullet of the end things that you're doing. And again, I think longer-term opportunities for collaboration can help facilitate that.
Yeah, I'll just make the comment that at least within the machine learning and AI initiative, that's conversations are going on. Ethics are front and center, and there's a nice mix there of the privacy issues as well as the security issues. And I'd also point out that IEEE has been taking a leadership role in this. There's something called the Internet Initiative, and they've been looking at ethical issues around security and privacy and how those tie into policy. So I think it's a multifaceted approach, and that's one thing that this administration has been very strong on is the public-private partnership approach, that it's not up to the government necessarily to do everything. And I think ethics is a particular area where ethical decisions are something that come out of society. So it's going to be more than just the government, but clearly the government, with things like the Menlo report, can facilitate that.
And last question.
Hi, I'm Ashley McClure-Catlin from DoD. I was curious, when you think about incidents like the recent OPM breach of federal employee data, how does that impact your relationships with academia and industry, and what do you do when that undermines your credibility with the general public?
What's the official position on that, Greg?
Well, so it's an issue that came up in the first hearing of the Commission on Enhancing National Cybersecurity. They were looking at it primarily more downstream once the technologies are out there for some of the cases that have been, in the public venue. I think the challenge back to the R&D community is, look, you have a benefactor. They are giving you $750 million a year. There is a basis for a conversation, and producing technologies that, support the cybersecurity plan, that support the privacy plan, that's part of what the country is asking for in terms of a tech base so that they can come to resolution on some of these things. It's not something that we're going to solve as researchers necessarily, but by, continuing that conversation and, participating in the development of these plans, the execution of these plans, the comments. I mean, if there's comments that you have on these plans about things that, points that we've missed, we're going to be redoing these. Congress wants us to redo the cybersecurity plan every 4 years. So, communicate that, or be prepared to communicate that.
Doug's still smart, even though TSA just got abused this week, right? It's a tricky thing. It's reputation-based stuff.
Yeah, well, we all get painted with the same brush when something like that happens, because even though it happened at OPM, there's plenty of other agencies that kind of just happened to get lucky and it wasn't them. But I think in the end, back to the R&D community and Greg's comment is, it's wake-up calls like that should force the R&D community to be thinking about, okay, what kinds of things could I do to solve that so that it doesn't happen again? There's also a piece that says at the back of that, who's going to be the entrepreneur to make the next product that actually OPM or any other government agency or even private sector company buys to make sure that doesn't happen again, right? So there's a really nice ecosystem built in there to try to help keep us from getting black eyes.
Yeah, I think also, one of the lessons to take home from those kinds of incidents are a lot of times the causes are more human use or lack of proper organizational use. And so when we talk about socio-technical systems, or Bill talks about not having passwords written on stickies on your laptop and things like that, that these are good things, that not all solutions many solutions are not just technical, they're the socio-technical, and I think that's a very powerful message that one can take from probably 90% of the incidents that we see, and really points to the importance of that class of research.
And if we use a risk management framework that's kind of standard that people can all understand, and then if an executive from one of those departments stands up and says, this is what we did and this is how we're looking at ourselves, you can use in a very transparent way to show we're following the best guidance that we know is out there, and if it still fails, then we've still got a bigger problem. But if we can normalize that a little bit, and that's part of the challenge too.
Okay, well, I think that concludes our panel. I think we're a little bit over time, but again, please continue discussions at the reception. If you didn't pick up your copy of the strategic plan, do so now. You can even get it autographed if you'd like. How is that for exciting, souvenir, right? And so again, thank you, and let's thank the panel for being here today.